Oh. Okay. Oops. Everybody froze for a minute, but there you are. I think we're back. So, Robin, do you want to get going since it's 1:02, and then hopefully we can have a couple of more folks join us. But let's officially get the CEC work group on early post-secondary opportunities off and going. I am Harmony Little, the Executive Director of Credentialing Strategies at Kentucky Community and Technical College System, and am one of your co-hosts along with.
My name is Robin Abear, and I'm a senior fellow here at the Council on Postsecondary Education, and so I am pleased to be your other co-host.
So we do have, folks who may or may not know each other here, et cetera. So we would like for you to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. We did ask you to give your name and your organization. So we kind of see you by that already. But if you can give your name, your organization, and if you can tell us one thing you like about springtime in Kentucky, Robin and I will do the same in the chat. But if we can just take a moment to introduce ourselves that way, that would be wonderful. Lots of folks that are enjoying the nicer weather and the greeneries and the flowers. Oh,
maybe pollen, not so much, right?
No. And then there's baseball season, of course, not to be missed either. All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. And if you haven't had a chance, please feel free to give your name, your title, where you work, and what you love about spring. I think are we ready to move on to today's objectives and the agenda? So Robin's going to share the screen. So you can see on the screen what we are hoping to achieve today. We've done the welcome and introductions. In a moment, Robin is going to give an overview of the Commonwealth, and particularly the Commonwealth Education Continuum, and particularly our work group focusing on early post-secondary opportunities. Then our fine colleagues from KY Stats is going to give us some data that really helps us understand the current landscape around early post-secondary opportunities. And we'll have the opportunity to have some discussion and thoughts about the data that's presented tied to that conversation. Then I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we're hoping that you can contribute before we get together and meet next, so that we can gather not empirical data, but if we can gather our own data and talk about that, and then we'll talk about next steps. So want to make sure that that's okay with everybody, and hand it over to Robin.
So we also wanted to just briefly overview the objectives for today, which you can see there on the screen. So we do want to make sure that everyone understands the goals and priorities of this work group and how they fit into the broader work of the Commonwealth Education Continuum, which we'll talk about a little bit more. We want to make sure that you have some clarity around your role, and then also to begin to plan for how we might engage stakeholders. And we're just so glad to have such a great variety on the call today. So we're just going to kick it off here with a brief overview of the Commonwealth Education Continuum, or what we call the CEC. The CEC was formed out of the moral imperative to strengthen Kentucky's education pipeline. You can see here that it is co-chaired by Kentucky's Lieutenant Governor, Jacqueline Coleman, also our very own president of the Council on Postsecondary Education, Dr. Erin Thompson, and the Commissioner of Education in Kentucky, Dr. Jason Glass. The broader CEC consists of 28 members, and they represent a very wide range of interests and expertise, ranging all the way from early childhood all the way up to Kentucky's workforce and government. So the continuum was formed to seek to improve actions to ensure that students can equitably earn the necessary degrees and credentials to enter the workforce successfully. And so you can see that it cuts across a broad spectrum of, we want to make sure students are prepared in P12, but also in terms of post-secondary degrees and credentials. And then we're also looking at, what impact that would have in terms of strengthening Kentucky's workforce and the economy of our state. So it has a very broad purpose. And underneath that purpose, the CEC established an annual objective, which is to develop and execute a specific plan to activate the biggest levers for increasing successful student transitions into post-secondary. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about how that relates to you. So from the beginning, the CEC has been very committed to stakeholder engagement and input. It's really all of their work is based on what different communities and stakeholders have shared and what they prioritized. To begin this conversation, I wanted to just really acknowledge the Education Strategy Group, and I think Lauren Norton is on our call today from that group. And in collaboration with the Council on Postsecondary Education, these groups held a series of interviews and focus groups with various stakeholders from across the state. And during this time, they coordinated with Kentucky's 8 regional cooperatives, and you can see that here on the screen. Because we wanted to ensure geographic diversity in terms of the feedback that we were receiving. And their questions really centered on 3 areas of interest to the CEC. And these included 9th grade readiness, early post-secondary opportunities, and the vitality of Kentucky's educator workforce. So altogether, 166 individuals participated in these interviews and different focus groups. And then all of the insights that were gleaned from these engagements have supported the CEC's recommendations that were very grounded in the interests and needs and challenges that were surfaced through all of the stakeholder engagement. So the annual report of the CEC includes a comprehensive list of their prioritized recommendations just related to all of this work. And we'll share with you a little bit later on where you can find a copy of that if you want to dig a little bit deeper into the initial work of the CEC. But this is really where our deep dive into the priorities, the priority recommendations begins. And the CEC moves into its 2nd year of existence and the work that it is going to do. All right, so that's kind of a brief overview of the CEC. Like I said, we'll send you more information and be certainly available to discuss further any of the questions that you have about that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I'm going to turn things over to Logan Rupert from KY Stats, and he's going to share some of the data that's related to early post-secondary opportunities in Kentucky, so that we can really be well informed about our conversations today.
Great. Logan, can you move to the next slide if you don't mind? I think Lauren's kicking us off here to talk about the importance of EPO participation and success, and then we'll dive into the details of the data. So Lauren, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. Hello, everyone. I see a couple familiar faces, but for those of you who don't know me, I am an associate director at Education Strategy Group, which is a national mission-based consulting firm. A lot of our work is around how to bridge together K-12 higher in the workforce to support students' economic mobility through post-secondary attainment. So we've had the great pleasure of working with Kentucky as they've launched the continuum over the past year and a half, and we'll be sticking around this year as well to see how the work progresses forward in this. So just wanted to center us before we dive into what we're seeing for Kentucky's students in terms of their participation in early post-secondary opportunities, just regrounding us in why these opportunities matter, which I know you all are familiar with, and that's why you guys do this work day to day, and why you all decided to participate in this work group. But we know that students who participate in early post-secondary opportunities, which for us here includes not just dual credit, which was a big focus of the Continuum's work last year, but also AP, IB, and kind of CTE kind of career pathway opportunities that students have access to across the state. So we know that students who participate in those opportunities are able to kind of accelerate their credit momentum as they transition into post-secondary by earning some of those early post-secondary credits. We also know that it helps to create a college-going culture within our schools, where students are kind of more familiar with what some of the expectations are for those college level courses that they'll be transitioning into. They're able to really bolster the confidence that they have and build some of those skills outside of just academic content. So time management, study skills that will make them successful once they make that transition into college coursework. We know that these course opportunities also help them to make more informed decisions around what their post-secondary plans and career goals are. So recognizing the value that ILPs and advising have in incorporating some of these course opportunities into making sure that students are making those informed decisions. We also have so nationally, there's some evidence. We have a strong hypotheses that students who participate in these EPOs are ultimately saving time and cost for once they transition into a college degree, and also increasing their likelihood of enrolling in post-secondary. So Kentucky probably has some of the strongest data. So I'm excited that Jessica is going to be walking through what we know about students' participation and access to these courses. But in particular would point folks towards, so that last bullet on this slide, CPE put out a great report around dual credit that showed that students who participate in dual credit are more likely to earn a first year college GPA of 3.0 than non-participants, and effects were even stronger, particularly for our low income students, which we know is really important for the Continuum's work. So just want to ground us in that. And with that, we'll pass it to Jessica.
Great, thanks, Lauren. So we have two kind of parts for this presentation. It's going to be, we're going to look at attempts and then also the success rates. And so I'm going to co-present with Logan Rupert, who is really the expert in the room on the data that we're getting ready to present today. So I'll kick us off with going through the slides, setting kind of our sample of who we're looking at here. So we're looking at all Kentucky Public School graduates from the academic year 16 all the way through the academic year 19. Some of the early post-secondary opportunities include AP, IB, dual credit, CTE, industry certificate, CTE pathway completer. So if you see on the slide or the chart that it says any EPO, it includes all of the above, okay? So first and foremost, we'll just start off with attempts. And over the course of 4 years, the most attempted EPO was advanced placement, followed by dual credit. A couple of caveats to this is that only a handful of schools offer IB. And then also the requirements to participate in AP vary by school. So as you're kind of looking at these trends, we just want to present some of the caveats behind some of the trends that you're seeing. So next, we're going to look at the proportion of students taking CTE dual credit courses versus the general dual credit courses, and that's steadily increased over time. So while the early post-secondary opportunities has remained relatively stable over the course of the last several years, there has definitely been an uptick in dual credit. Dual credit has grown 75% since the inception of the dual credit scholarship, which if you see on this graph here, that students began to be eligible for that in the fall of 2017. So if you want to look at the share of CTE dual credit versus the non-CTE dual credit courses, CTE dual credit participation is steadily growing. So over the past 2 years, you see that the share has been approximately 25% of the CTE dual credit enrollment. This chart kind of breaks down EPO participation by student characteristics. If you look at the green line in the center, that's kind of the percent of all students' participation in dual credit, or in an EPO, sorry. So anything above that green line would be subgroups that are higher percent participation than the all students, and anything below that breakdown would be a lower percent of that subgroup population that are participating in EPOs. Here you'll see kind of the participation that varies by race and the type of EPO. So you'll see that we have that any EPO category across the bottom: AP, dual credit, CTE completer, and industry certificate. And you'll notice that what we're taking is the number of the students participating in the particular EPO that's highlighted over the total number in that particular category of graduates. So here you see that Black and Hispanic students access AP and dual credit classes at lower rates than their peers. Next, something else. This is kind of the breakdown in a similar fashion for those that are receiving free or reduced price lunch. You'll see that higher income students are more likely to attempt EPOs, and in particular, they take advantage of the dual credit opportunities the most. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Logan, and he'll talk about kind of the pass rate and those trends in those EPOs. Logan?
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. So once students are enrolling in these EPO courses, how are they earning credits and succeeding in those courses is, the next question in that. So for our EPO data, we wanted to, again, look at the graduates from the 16 academic year through the 19 academic year. And to earn credit or pass those courses, you needed to earn an AP exam score of 3, an IB exam score of 5 or higher, earning a CT industry certificate, or completing that CTE pathway. Our dual credit data in this example is a little bit different. As opposed to just looking at graduates in each year, it looks at all the students 9th through 12 in that academic year and looks at their course enrollments. So they could be anywhere from a freshman in high school to a senior in high school in that particular academic year we're going to show. And as long as they earned a D or above, we counted them as passing that course. So here we can look and see that, a higher percentage are completing a CTE pathway than have earned the industry certificate or passing IB exams. Over the previous 4 years, about 1 in 3 are completing a pathway, 1 in 5 earning a CTE industry certificate, 1 in 6 passing an AP exam. And then, as mentioned before, our IB population is fairly limited in the state, so a small number of graduates across the years. This is breaking down the dual credit pass rates on the right and the AP and IB exam pass on the left. And one thing to note here is, again, the left chart is showing graduates in each academic year how many had passed an AP exam or IB exam before graduating. And then in the right dual credit, we're looking at all high school students who are enrolling in and passing their dual credit course. For AP and IB, we are looking at the number of students enrolling in that course. And we're aware that not all students enrolling are taking an exam, but wanted to look at everyone who is enrolling in those courses and has those courses available that they are participating in. The same numbers we looked at in the last chart, again, looking at how those vary by subgroups. The left side is looking at all AP students in this example. We can see that Asian and gifted and talented students are around 60%, where LAP, special education, and Black students are about 20% in our data. Dual credit course pass rates are also variable, but are much more consistent between the groups than some of the AP exam pass rates. Looking at specifically race and ethnicity on the left side again, Asian students are the highest, Black students are the lowest, and then the Hispanic, 2 or more races, and white students are all about the state average. We can see that the urban students are completing at a higher rate than rural students. Paid lunch students are completing at higher, and then males and females are both about 40%. This looks at those same breakouts for the industry credentials and CTE pathways, and we can see that the rural students, students on free or reduced price lunch, and male students complete both the industry credentials and CTE pathways at a higher rate than their peers. And this looks at those two by race and ethnicity again, and we can see that the white students are earning their credentials and completing CTE pathways at higher rates than students of colors. Students with LEP or limited English proficiency have the lowest industry certificate and CTE pathway completion rates. And we can see that gifted and talented special education and the all graduate average there as well. So I know we went through a lot of data points in a pretty brief amount of time. We just wanted to pause here and ask what questions do you have about this data that we've presented? What surprised you, or what additional questions do you have after seeing this?
Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, I'm going to focus on the growth in dual credit that you have seen, and wanted to point out, of course, that your data goes through academic year 19, but would expect to see that trend grow in 21 and 22. For those of you who missed the introductions early on, I'm at KCTCS, and we're the largest dual credit provider in the state. So I follow this data closely and believe it's one of the reasons I'm one of the co-chairs on this team, right? But I think that growth in dual credit is wonderful on one respect, because what our internal data shows, in addition to what you've presented here, Logan, is that students who come to us with dual credit tend to have better outcomes, right? So this whole notion that dual credit students do better, it's a way to them to get familiar with college, is a way to ensure that transition, and all of that holds true. But what gives me alarm, and again, I'm focusing on the dual credit side, but I think it holds true for many of the other early post-secondary opportunities that you showed, is just the difference between who is accessing it or being successful in that. So I don't know if there's an access issue. I don't know if there's another reason why these other subgroups that you're pointing out are not getting it. But knowing the tremendous benefit that this can have for students, I really think it's something that we need to try to figure out and or recommend strategies how to make sure that these opportunities are available to more students. And then Justin offered in the chat, he's not sure if he wants to come off or not, but I'm happy to read that he says nothing much surprising that the 3 different things are grouped is a bit surprising, as they're really doing 3 very different things, different instructors, different systems. So appreciate that feedback, Justin. Anyone else have any? Yeah.
Harmony, it's Stephanie at the K-Web. I just had some questions about whether or not any equity initiatives have ever been targeted towards both dual credit and industry credentials, because I know the racial breakdown is pretty stark. If there had ever been a concerted effort to target that particular part of the population and students.
It was conversations we were just, from my perspective where I sit and with our partners, it was conversations we were just starting to have pre-pandemic, and there were a couple of great toolkits that had been released around that time. But because of the pandemic, that work didn't happen. But I think we're all at the point where we're wanting to pick that up. Are my thoughts on that. Robin or anybody else, feel free to comment, or I'd like to hear, of course, this is the KCTCS perspective. Maybe some of our 4-year partners are doing something that they can share.
No, you're right. I mean, the CEC group talked a lot about that in this particular data that Logan showed us. And I believe there are some, almost sure I remember that some of the specific strategies and some of the work that has already started is targeted around improving access.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that feedback.
I do have a D is a passing grade, but I do wonder how dramatically different the data looks if you take out the D grades. And one thing we talked a lot about in the CEC group was what comes next with the data, and really, looking at, performance and looking at, pass rates in the next higher level courses. A lot of these courses are gateway courses to other courses. And maybe we're going to get into this later in the discussion, but and I apologize, I got distracted with something on my phone when Logan got to the last slide. Did you show something that demonstrated total number of hours or average hours earned by students and how that varied?
We did not have that in this slideshow, but removing the D grades, gateway courses, amount of credits are all things we can look into.
I am continuing to hear more and more concerns, the concern around whether or not we have some students earning too many hours.
Yes.
And so I would be interested to kind of see ranges. Maybe there's that less than 6 or 6 or less range, 7 to 12, 13, I don't know. You're the stats person. But I do think that I would love for this group to have some conversation around that topic.
And Jenny, if you don't mind, I want to piggyback on a few things, and then I'll bring in some of the comments that are in the chat, unless everybody can turn on the chat feature and follow along as well. But I think you make a great point about the D, because even though that it's a passing grade, it's not always a grade that will be that can transfer, because many programs require a C or better. So I think that would be very valuable data. And then the other thing you said, which I think is where you were going, but if not, I'll take it in other direction, or perhaps piggyback on it. And that is, do we know what the sweet spot is, right? Is there a difference between taking one course in 3 credit hours versus, is 12 credit hours sort of, if you at least get to this point, then you have the best outcomes? Because there's got to be a point where taking more courses does not necessarily, apart from what transfer and what they can bring into one program, because best case scenario, the students took all the right courses for the one thing they want to do after high school. But we know, unfortunately, that doesn't happen all of the time. So I'd be really curious if there's a way to find out what is the magic number of courses for somebody to take to have the best possible outcomes.
College Board has done a lot of research in that area, as it does to ADP. And part of that has been to combat these students who are really in these like unbelievably difficult, stressful, AP schedules, their junior and senior years. And that's what prompted them to do some of that research in that area. And they found that sweet spot to be 4 to 6 AP courses.
Okay, great.
Well, and I saw also a couple comments about the lack of funding of some programs that had been suggested, as well as financial assistance to the particular students with costs of the industry credentialing opportunities. And that is definitely something where the KWIB and the state can provide. Anyone 16 to 24 is eligible under WIOA for the Opportunity Youth, and they can provide additional services costs that tuition and scholarship like the Work Ready Scholarship would not cover. So there is a lot of opportunity to put those tools into the hands of the educators at the local level as well, that maybe we could do a better job communicating what resources we have available in this space already, and maybe just make some better connections. I know the CTE team at the KWIB had been talking about recruitment of industry professionals for teaching of some of these classes and other certificate programs, and really just connecting folks who are doing the work with the educators so that we've got a better connection and more access in the places where that may be a little bit lacking. So just wanted to say that I think we can be helpful in this space. And if financials are a piece of it, you know, if you're looking to scale up support and access for that, I mean, that is what the statewide reserve grant is for. You know, I think KDE had proposed kind of the grow your own model and the apprenticeship model as their last request to the statewide reserve grant, but I haven't seen anything from them since that time. But this is definitely in line with the priorities of the KWIB and the priorities of the administration. That would absolutely be something that they could fund.
Great. Thank you for that, Stephanie. And there are a couple of comments in the chat that answered your previous question in terms of work, the equity work that's going on. If you didn't notice that, wanted to make sure you saw that, Stephanie.
Yes, ma'am, I absolutely did. Thank you very much, everyone, for your answers.
Yeah. And then Julie, congrats on your daughter's graduation in general, but 36 credit hours is a lot. Hopefully that can all go towards something. And then Jennifer is asking why we would offer AP and IB classes instead of a dual credit course if we know students taking dual credit courses go on further to post-secondary success. What pluses for those two types of classes versus dual credit? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Is IB industry based?
No, International Baccalaureate.
Ah, got it. It's not my alphabet soup, so thank you.
Logan, can you comment about the difference in the data of AP success rate in college?
The data, it's pretty clear that those enrolling in dual credit are more likely to pass and earn a credit. It's hard to speak from the longitudinal data side of things, why or how that may differ. But I'm not sure if anyone else may have more to add.
Justin offered something in the chat saying that sometimes that's largely decided in 7th grade and that they don't have good models to give students a reset to get into a different pathway. Leslie, not sure if you want to chime in, but from what I've heard just over the years and in working in this role, it's having different tools in the toolkit for students, right? And not all, not all private schools accept dual credit the way public schools do, for example, but they accept AP or the IB is becoming more recognized too, right? So it's giving students those choices.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with Harmony and her team and some four-year institutions to develop model pathways that start in grade 9 and span grade 14 and 16. And the idea behind those models is to integrate and embed where it makes sense, the relevant dual credit, the relevant AP/IB. And I think that's really been our intentional focus even pre-COVID. Harmony went on a roadshow with us before the pandemic that we entitled Make Every Credit Count. And so this idea again of, dual credit for the sake of dual credit or AP for the sake of AP is really not what we're promoting. It's what AP makes sense, what dual credit makes sense based on your career goals and aspirations and your potential career major. And so I think as long as we're intentional in the advising of students around those, I don't think it's an either or, but I do hear a lot from parents and school counselors that to the AP question, sometimes there is a lot of guessing in terms of which institutions will transcript that for credit towards a major versus just elective credit. So I think sometimes folks feel like there's some vagueness there, whereas dual credit is obviously transcripted and it counts towards the major. So again, there's pros and cons, but I think it's really all about intentional advising and really guiding students to those experiences that make the most sense based on their path.
Yeah, so I want to share about from a parent perspective. So as I mentioned, my daughter has 36 credit hours. She started with 2 classes sophomore year, 4 junior year, and then took 6 her senior year. So we slowly built her hub up, and my son's doing the same thing. But what we realized from our counselors were they were just putting kids into dual credit classes, not taking into account their interests.
Yep.
So like my daughter had no interest in environmental science, but because that was the only class offered, they wanted to put her in it. I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with her interest or pathways. And there was another point I was going to make, now I forget what it was. So I'll pipe back on when I think of what it was.
Well, she took an AP course as well, right?
She took one AP. She did she did calc this year and
Yeah.
took the AP exam. But oh, I know what the other thing I was going to say was the other thing when looking at the dual credit classes that she took, she knew she wanted to go to UK and major in psychology. So we on our own had to find that matching mechanism from Thomas More. You guys know the database I'm talking about where you're matching the classes up to make sure they transferred. And most parents aren't going to know to do that. I have a prior experience in higher education, so I knew to do that. But if a student doesn't know that, you very well could be wasting your time with some of the dual credit classes because they're not matching and going to transfer properly where you think they are.
Yep. Yep.
Harmony, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So who else on this group was on the CEC initial EPO group?
I don't know, maybe Robin, or if you feel like you want to, virtually or physically raise your hand and show since we're done.
Proxy for my associate commissioner, David Horseman. So I've been engaged here and there, but not completely.
So I do think that it would be helpful to share with this group all of the recommendations and the recommended strategies that came out of that group. One of them, probably the strongest one, had to do with advising and creating a tool for counselors and parents and students to use that would address Julie's concern. But I mean, I'm happy to reach out, or Harmony, or you could reach out to Amanda Ellis or to Jennifer Frakes and get those that we could share.
Yeah, Robin can do that too. She works with both of them.
Okay.
Yep. But a good, very good point, Jenny, to make sure that everybody here is informed. There is a lot of new membership on this group.
Right.
So Robin, I'm sorry if I spoke over you.
Oh, no, you're fine. I just wanted to say that in the follow-up email to this meeting, you'll receive a copy of the annual report. And Jenny, all of those recommendations are included there, as well as quite a bit of information about the Kentucky Advising Academy, which has come out of and been a result of the work of the CEC. And it does address a lot of the communication piece and the advising piece that we're talking about today. So I'm sure we'll get into that a lot deeper as we go on, but we will make sure that everyone gets a copy of all of those recommendations.
So going back to the conversation we were having, first, I want to make sure, Logan, that you saw Jennifer's comment in terms of being interested in the demographic data of the IB and AP class versus dual credit demographic data. So if you can add that, since you wanted to know more, what we wanted to know more, that's a specific ask for you. And then our technical assistance provider from the College and High School Alliance, Alex Perry, has provided some great insight into some other reasons why maybe AP versus dual credit, but also that sometimes a combination of both is what helps prepare students the best. The thing I'm going to add to that earlier question is just, you all know how complex this all is, and there's so many moving pieces, but one of them is who was able to teach dual credit, right? So I think sometimes that also brings in the AP versus dual credit, or AP and dual credit. It's not binary and either or, but because there are credentialing requirements that the college sets for who can teach the course, a high school may not always be able to offer a course that they want to teach, but the instructor can teach the AP course, and that's another way to help their students with early post-secondary opportunities. So there are just so many complexities to this, but a really great question, and I think it also highlights the fact something that a small team of us in Kentucky who work on this regularly have talked about, the need, sort of making everybody understand what those different things are in the toolbox. What is AP and why would a student want to take it? What is IB? International Baccalaureate, why would students want to take it, and so on and so forth, because I think, to Julie's point and to others' point, not everybody may be so well versed in this. And I think, the other piece that I did not see in the data that I'm not quite sure how you would tease out is understanding who is a first gen student, right? Because I think some of this comes down to familiarity and knowledge too. And I'd venture to say that, most of us on this phone call, if we have children, could sort of say, you should take advantage of this when it becomes available to you. But not everybody had a post-secondary experience and can guide their children or be able to say. So it comes back to that advising piece that you pointed to, Jenny, and you as well, Julie. But I don't know if there's a way to tease that out in the data, Jessica or Logan, in terms of, maybe parental educational level or something like that. Because I'd venture to say, I would think that you see a lot more dual credit students whose parents probably have a post-secondary degree.
I didn't know if Logan was going to chime in, but yes, we can definitely take a look at that. That's something that has not been brought up yet. And as we continue on this conversation, things that you guys are mentioning, that we can actually provide some data behind, we are taking notes and trying to, do follow-ups for our next meeting and such. So keep the ideas rolling.
Okay. And somebody brought up CLEP in the chat. So are you talking about credit for prior learning when you're saying CLEP, since we are using educational acronyms here? Just want to make sure we're not making assumptions so we know what everybody's talking about. I think that was Julie. Yeah, you're talking about credit for prior learning opportunities.
Yeah, somebody else had brought that up, but I had heard about those before. I don't know a whole lot about them as a parent, so I never brought those up to my kids, but there's probably areas that they could pass exams in knowing them.
Yes, and the other piece to complicate this, is also this opportunity around articulated credit, right? And Leslie, I don't know if you want to speak to that. It sort of speaks, I think, to that credential CTE completion or the CTE credential opportunities, because you could convert those to credits, which is a way to get to credit for prior learning.
It is. Yeah, it is a model of credit for prior learning. So in our world, in our CTE world, our students who pass either an end of program assessment associated with their career pathway, or they pass an industry certification, as well as any other established criteria that the institution may have, then they can walk into their first semester with that institution and transcript anywhere from 3 to 12 college credit hours, depending upon which pathway we're talking about and which institution we're talking about. So I would hope, and I don't know, I don't recall whether the continuum discussed this, but I would really hope that articulated credit would be an EPO that we would kind of be holding up and looking at potentially as part of this work. And I know that most other state models that recognize EPSOs, like some of them call them EPSOs, they throw the S in there. But I do know that articulation and credit for prior learning is a part of some of those other state models.
So I think that that's something that from a data standpoint, we're going to have to talk to people like you, Leslie, who you're saying these things qualify for articulated credit or credit for prior learning. Mm-hmm. And once we identify those things from our different partners, we'll be able to pull that out of the data and include that in the EPO. So that's a really good point.
Okay.
Harmony, I just wanted to mention also that just big kudos to all the folks who've been involved in the data slides. That at our last meeting with the CEC, there was a request to also include students with IEPs or students with disabilities, and so we that has been added. Special education has been added to the data, and that's been really eye-opening. So they've been super responsive in terms of helping us see a better picture, a more clear picture, as the conversation has evolved.
Have we exhausted the data conversation? Are there any other thoughts? Jessica and Logan, are you happy with your to-do list?
I was just wondering if, Justin, you haven't come off mute to talk at all, but there have been some really interesting comments in the chat. I was really curious about the comment you made about addressing equity through your teacher collaborative teacher model. So I wondered if you would speak up a little bit about that.
Sure. So University of Kentucky, I've worked here for 14 years, but University of Kentucky is really late to the game of dual credit, recognizing that almost everyone else in here has been doing it for a long time. But sometimes being late to the game is beneficial in that we can build our model having some known knowns. One of the things that we saw in the data that concerned us was the question of equity in deployment based off of what Julie was saying in the chat, which is there's only dual credit certified teachers available in so many places, and they tend to get recruited to school districts that can pay more, further like causing broader equity challenges. So our approach at UK is to use a collaborative teacher model where there's a lead University of Kentucky instructor that is linked to multiple high school teachers simultaneously across the state in a synchronous course. And so just like this in Zoom, but imagine like 75 high school kids, 4 or 5 high school teachers, and 1 UK lead instructor, all teaching a course simultaneously. The 2 adults then, both the university instructor and the high school instructor, surround each kid. So we've seen a lot of success in the early days of this. We're just sort of coming out of pilot mode here at UK right now. Now, look, it's not more cost efficient to do it this way. There's 2 adults supporting each kid instead of 1 adult supporting each kid. And so, you know, there's a pretty big downside. However, when you deploy it that way, we've managed to build partnerships with school districts that don't have but 1 or 2 dual credit certified high school teachers on site and allow them to put University of Kentucky courses into their buildings. So, you know, I think we are lucky to be late to the game to try to bring an approach. Now, how all this is going to scale, I think there's a lot of questions, but anyway, to the question of this issue of equity and dual credit instructors, that's one thing that we are trying to work on. The other thing that I was about to put in chat is other states take a more direct approach to get more people dual credit certified. Kentucky really doesn't have any mechanism to help a high school teacher become dual credit certified. So in Indiana, for instance, the state provides a scholarshiping model to high school teachers in exchange for teaching dual credit courses to get graduate credit so that they can meet that 18 credit hour minimum, so that they just broadly expand the pool of potential people able to teach dual credit courses. So it's another thing that we might learn from.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. And I just wanted to ask if there were any of our participants today from high schools who wanted to share. I don't think we've heard anybody speak up who works directly in a high school. Awesome in the chat.
My name's Dean Monarch. I teach at Meade County in the College and Career Center. I'm actually a CTE machine tool instructor. And I was curious about KCTCS. I'm dual credit certified basically as an adjunct professor. So I'm a little unfamiliar with some of the university aspects of what is required for dual credit. I'm assuming is it master's degree or is it above master's degree that isn't required for dual credit?
So this is where the really fun answer is it depends. It becomes really simple when we talk about what we call the general education courses, right? Your math, your English, your communication, your sciences, etc. SAC COC, which is our accrediting bodies, both for KCTCS and the public 4 years in Kentucky, they set the standard for the 18 credit hours at graduate, right, level. So that is the same across the board. Where you see variations on the KCTCS side is exactly the field you're in, which is the technical courses. Each college, because they're independently accredited, gets to set their own standards for what it's required to teach there. Forgive me, those friends who have heard me say this before, but not everybody on the call have. So I will give my famous example of, we have a business for law course, and it's set by course, not by program. So for example, 4 of our institutions require that you have a law degree to teach this course, while the other 8 do not, right? So we can't even say across the state, to teach this course, you have to have the following. The other thing that complicates things sometimes is, in addition to being accredited by SAC COC, some programs have their own accreditation, our business program being one of them. And if you're part of, I forget what the national accreditation is, but if the institution carries that accreditation, it requires that those instructors are accountants, right? So every time that we add this level to being able to teach, it makes it more difficult to find a high school instructor with those qualifications. So I hope that answers your question, Dean, but probably not the answer you wanted. We're really happy that you met the qualifications to teach the course you teach, though.
I'll add in a little bit from Shelby County Public Schools. We have a heavy dual credit program that I help coordinate as the college and career coordinator. And we have close proximity to the Shelby campus of JCTC from Shelby County High School. So students actually physically walk to the campus and take their classes there. At Martha Lane Collins, which is a bus ride away from the college campus, we have not really gotten into, for our gen ed courses, a lot of certifying our teachers, but rather we use an online platform with JCTC for some of our dual credit gen eds there. And then we have an area technology center, obviously, where our teachers there are teaching the career tech ed dual credit. And I think we only have one pathway right now where we're kind of in a spot with growing a teacher up to that. There was a change in staff. But we have used an online model for dual credit. Again, we talked a little bit about staffing that in-house. It gets into a lot of allocations because we're used to doing it online. And so now it's like, oh, we provide a teacher for that. So it becomes an allocation conversation. But it has worked well for us. Our kids do very well. And we have really good communication. Like, I work very closely with Dr. Michael Schell, who's our campus director at our local Shelby campus of JCTC. He and I partner quite a bit. But also we don't have, I think, our equity piece. I think we're doing fairly well on that. I'd put in the chat that I have intentional conversations with students, African American and Hispanic students, and including their parents, about dual credit opportunities, either when the student becomes eligible to take dual credit or when we foresee that might be something that they need to know about. But our Board of Education provides 6 classes or 18 credit hours free gen eds, and that's above and beyond the dual credit scholarship and work ready scholarship. So we don't really have an access problem, and our board has agreed to pay any digital content and book fees for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So those are billed back to the district. So it's quite a commitment from our board, and it has really made access in our program really amazing. And it's something we can offer any student who we feel like qualifies for that and will be successful. And then the last point I'll make is that we started the A2C program with Jefferson last year, which is the Accelerate to College for English. And we're adding the math next year, which is similar to what Justin mentioned before about the partnering. So that's the 0 level course, the first semester partnering with a certified teacher or qualified teacher at the college level. And then the student then goes into the credit bearing course the second semester. So it's just a scaffolding for success. And we have had great success with the 3 A2C English classes that we did this year with juniors. and they're going to be scaffolding into 101 at a high rate. And then we're adding the math option for the seniors, which is more of a semester-based program. So that was a lot. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm going to mute myself and answer that phone.
That was some really great information. Thank you, Cece. And something you said sparked another maybe data request, which is this change that took place a little back, but it doesn't impact, it starts with where you stop. And that's that with the pandemic, we waived and allowed students to enter with a GPA. And thanks to CPE new admission requirements, that's now permanent. So I would be curious if we could see in the data, either a change in demographic or change in some of these subpopulations in terms of if that allowing students to enroll with the GPA changes maybe who accesses it.
I can speak for Woodford County. I'm a counselor here. It sounds like we are blessed. We do have teachers who are credentialed to teach dual credit in English, math, science, and social studies in our building. Also in career and tech ed areas. In terms of that GPA change that has happened just locally, I work with the dual credit students, so I definitely have been able to see that more students have access to dual credit based on that. Now we just have to look at GPA rather than the GPA and the ACT score. And this year they seem like they have done fine with that. And then going back to the conversation about dual credit versus AP, I know in terms of our advising, we have a dual credit chemistry class and an AP chemistry. So when it comes to that, we think our dual credit chemistry is for non-science majors, and our AP chemistry, we sort of push students to that one if they are going into like a STEM major for college. So that does really come down to the advising process when we're looking at discussing AP versus dual credit for us here at Woodford.
Hey, Becky, do you think you could update the group on the changes coming for this coming year as far as the scholarship availability through KIA?
Sure. Basically, we are just adding the ability for students to have additional gen ed. And so there were changes in the state budget language, and this was all done through the budget. So it's a 2-year change. It's not a permanent change to the program. But what it's doing is our dual credit scholarship, the regular one, will be exclusively for gen ed, and juniors and seniors will have 2 free classes there each. So they could possibly get 2 as juniors and then 2 as seniors while we have these provisions in place. And then we're just going to keep the Work Ready dual credit in place that does 2 per year that's attached to those career and tech ed pathways for students 9 through 12 in place. So big picture here is, you have 8 possible career and tech ed, you have 4 possible gen ed, so it's a possible 12 if students kind of hit everything in the right sequence over these next 2 years. And there's also a rate increase. So we're jumping up to 50% of the KCTCS rate. And that's going to translate to $91 per credit hour.
Thank you.
I think that's been a wonderful discussion, and appreciate the feedback and input from everybody. Want to sort of put out last call on this topic, not to say that we can't bring it up or talk about it any further, but feels like maybe we've reached that point where we've provided the feedback based on what Logan and Jessica shared with us. And I think we've given them a lot of to-dos to come back and share with us at some point in the future.
Okay. So we're going to transition the conversation now kind of away from the data, but just want to say a big thank you again to all of our folks who have provided the slides and all the data analysis for us, and what we've learned so far, what we are learning, what we know about this EPSO work. I wanted to transition now just a bit into our conversation about a little bit more about this work group. Like, what are we doing? What is your role on the work group? And what are some of the commitments that we hope that you will help us with as we continue to do the work? So I'm going to share a couple of more slides to kind of summarize for you where we're headed with this work. So the purpose that has been established for the work group is to expand access and attainment of early post-secondary opportunities for all students. And I'm really glad that you all brought up the equity conversation, because we're especially about improving access and attainment for Kentucky's underrepresented students. And when we've looked at all of this data today, we kind of know who that is and kind of who we're talking about there. And so on the screen, you're going to see some of the questions that we hope our work group will explore, kind of a beginning list of some of the questions that we'll be looking at. I want to give you a minute just to read the slide and take a look, and especially how might Kentucky, and then, think about each one of these questions that's in a box. These are questions and ideas that have come out of the conversations and all of the stakeholder feedback from the CEC up to this point. At our last CEC meeting in March, we had some breakout conversations. We took careful notes, and these are some of the deeper conversations that the folks on the CEC have come up with. And so I wanted to just give you all a moment to take a look at these questions, and then to just raise any questions, comments, or additions to what you see here in terms of what our work group can really be moving toward. And you can feel free to come off mute to just voice those, or even to drop them into the chat, so we'll have kind of a written record of some of your thinking.
Robin, I don't know if it's just my screen, but I can't see the last few words on C there. Can you read?
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Leslie, for letting me know. C is to promote communications that update policymakers and stakeholders annually about Kentucky's early post-secondary opportunity landscape and progress toward our goals.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to pipe in on the second box on letter A.
Okay.
Through a partnership with Grow NKY Parent Camp, which is the nonprofit that I co-founded, and collaboration like 40 organizations, we in September and January did a Parent Camp Northern Kentucky College and Career event, which we had 20 different rooms with all the different opportunities across the spectrum. We had 200 parents sign up for it. They absolutely loved it because of the structure of it. It's autonomous. They get to choose which rooms they go to, when, where, and they're all facilitated dialogues. They're not presentations. And so they don't feel like they're talked down to. So it's providing more and more opportunities like that. So that way it empowers the kids and the parents, but connects them to the resources to get the questions answered that they need to get answered, and connects them to the resources that know who to reach out to.
Thank you for that, Julie. I would love to hear more about that as we move forward. Thank you.
I wondered about just the first box on the upper left about traditionally underrepresented students. Is our first generation college students ever discussed in this work, rather than maybe ethnicity or racial demographics, or in addition to?
The short answer, Susie, is yes. We didn't have a lot in today's data presentation about that, but definitely we'll dig into that that group in future meetings. But yes, thank you for bringing that up.
I just kind of find in my advising with students that that can sometimes be the hinge point to the steepness of their need. This understanding the landscape of post-secondary if they have not had anyone in their family attend.
Susie, I appreciate you for surfacing that. And I think one of the things I'm curious about, since I sit at the post-secondary institution, is when should that start? I mean, I hear from some colleagues that, you know, having those conversations in 9th and 10th grade is too late, right? And I think Justin from UK said earlier, you know, some of these tracks are already set as early as 7th grade. Right. So that's kind of one of the things I'm wondering on too, right? Like, so I see Julie chiming in saying they need to start in middle school. So, you know, part of my question is kind of what is the reach and when, you know, do we map this for best possible scenario? And in that case, you know, I'm not sure, but I don't think anybody from middle school is represented on this group, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, there's another group meeting right now about 9th grade on track, and there are definitely middle school representatives on that team. But that's a good idea.
I mean, we have to pay attention to it because one of the things that's happening in Lexington, and I don't know about the rest of the state, but it's a priority of the school district here right now to start to do more of high school in middle school so that kids can do more of college in high school. And so, you know, we are the whole system is trying to push down, and whether or not those are good ideas or not, I have no idea. But it is a long-term problem. But to that point around, you know, we can largely track the students. You can track it back further than that, but the structural decisions about which classes students start to take gets made in that period. One of the real frustrations for us at UK is that the high school, the elementary, secondary system has largely already made choices about who's college going and who's not college going before we as colleges ever start to enter that conversation.
I wonder about maybe a two-prong approach, you know, because sometimes when you talk to middle school students, especially first generation college students, would be first generation college students, there's just not a lot of framework there for them to even understand that conversation or be ready for that. But I'm just wondering about, we have quite a bit of screening information in our district. We use MAP testing 3 times a year, and I don't want to, you know, lower this down to like a test score for students, but that certainly gives us an indication of students' readiness. And that's where I start those conversations with our underrepresented students who are showing the ability to do that, but may not even know about that opportunity. And to be honest, I know that's low hanging fruit, but to be honest, that has yielded a lot of return. And that work gets harder as you get off that low hanging fruit. But I feel like, you know, we can see early, but those conversations don't have a lot of hold with our middle school students who even don't have a framework for college yet. But I do think in high school, you can see years of information about a student who might have been in your district for, you know, 6-7 years even. And you can see that landscape of data that you have on them, whether it be test scores or even relationships with teachers or support networks, to start those conversations. But it is an individual thing. Like, you have to look at each kid. That makes it challenging in its own right. But then also having maybe a two-pronged approach where you have some scaffolded programs like the HUC program for students who may not have met, they're doing high school in high school, which I tell kids that is okay to be doing high school in high school. You are not behind. But being able to provide the HUC program for students who need that scaffold for access. For that initial, maybe it's a class, maybe it's 2 classes before they leave high school rather than 12. There's a different, and I don't think one is less offering. It's that introduction and that care of letting kids know we recognize that you can do this. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I think providing what kids need, having multiple on-ramps, if you will, for post-secondary work.
It's meeting them where they're at, right? So Jennifer provided some additional information in the chat about her youngest. They opened up advanced classes to students by application. who met X number out of 8 criteria instead of being selected or invited. So let students have some skin in the game if they thought they could do the work but hadn't been offered it before. So I appreciate that. What we all are saying, I think it's around the first box here. I wonder, I'm not sure it's a separate category, but I feel like it's a subcategory, or maybe just adding a word to this, but it's the exposure language, right? Like to everything that Susie has just said, if somebody has not been on a college campus or has not had parents or family members who have gone, etc. So is there value in just giving them exposure and access to it so that they can see what it's all about? It might not necessarily be through a dual credit course or anything like that. It could be a summer camp. It could be, a visit day of or whatever. But I wonder if there's any value in adding exposure.
I just want to pipe in here in Boone County, all of our students use a program called U Science to try to match their aptitudes and their interests. And I participated in the senior exit interviews this year, and a large number of kids reference using the U Science to help them kind of focus their pathway and going to college. So it'll be really interesting to see, because this is the first year all grade levels have done it in the high school, how it has helped the freshmen as they move up and choose their courses and things.
Okay. I don't want to cut the conversation short, but thank you all for adding some additional context to these questions. I did want to also mention that one of the exciting pieces of our group's work this year will be to also provide feedback and advice and support around the development of Kentucky's dual credit toolkit, as well as the policy, the dual credit policy, because it is in need of some updates and revisions. And so we will have established a dual credit advisory council, and I'm hoping that some of you will be involved with that work. But then this will be kind of a feedback loop body that will help us to make sure that we get the right pieces and all of the right information and opportunity in that policy and in that toolkit. So excited to work on that as our year continues. All right, so then we're going to kind of move into some ideas around the member roles for this work group. And these are some of the things that we hope that you will help us do as we work together. You're already showing a lot of the expertise that you have and sharing a lot of the expertise that you have. And what we would really love to be able to do is to figure out how to lift up some of these key ideas, programs, policies, initiatives, but just all of your brilliance, just to lift that up as we're working in this early post-secondary space. Continue to lift up policy barriers and opportunities that we might have. Work on these deliverables in terms of what we want around the dual credit policy and the dual credit toolkit. And then just to continue to advocate. We know that all of you have professional circles and personal circles that you travel in, just to continue to advocate for the work that this group does by building awareness and involving and engaging many of the stakeholders who are across the state and who are in circles that you travel in. So there are a couple of things that we would hope that you would commit to do. The first one is to attend our work group meetings whenever it's possible. We know that you're all busy people, and we'll give and extend grace, as we do this work together. But we do have meetings scheduled in July, August, October, and November. And if that schedule is confusing to you, it's because on months when the CEC will actually meet, this group will not meet as a whole group, but then we'll be able to bring back information from the continuum meetings to share with you and to provide updates to them about what's going on in the work groups. So that might explain why the schedule is as it is. And then one of the other things that we would really love for you all to do is to help us at the beginning here to engage stakeholders. And so we would love for you to conduct at least one interview or a focus group if you have access to a larger number of people to inform our work. And Harmony is going to talk a little bit more about that now.
Yes, I am. So here comes our first big ask of you as work group members. And that's, as Robin said, is we're asking you to conduct at least one stakeholder interview or even a focus group if you feel like you can get that together by June 30th. Interview questions and notes pages and all of that is going to be shared with you after this meeting, not like literally today, but shortly thereafter. So as we explore early post-secondary opportunities, we really want to hear from different stakeholders like students, counselors, post-secondary advisors, family members, administrators, teachers, etc. So Robin is going to pop up a form here for us where we can take a couple of minutes because we still have time on the agenda where if you put on your thinking hat and just for a moment, think about who do you have within your network that you could interview. And we're only asking for one, but if you have more, if you can bring a focus group together, that would be amazing. So as my colleagues know, my husband teaches high school English at an alternative school here in Lexington. So I'm thinking that I have access pretty much to his entire school, right? Like I can ask him, I can ask his teachers, I can ask his students, I can ask administrators. I have a friend who is a counselor at one of the other local high schools, so I could ask her. I have a coworker in a different county whose son just completed dual credit, not with us, but with another institution. So just sharing those to get your juices flowing. So Robin was able to get the form up on the screen. Fear not if you don't see your name on this part of the screen, it is further on. So you can also click the link that she put in the chat. And if you feel so inclined, we are going to have about an uncomfortable 3 to 5 minutes where we're going to ask you to brainstorm and not put in names, but put in like student, counselor, and whether you think it's one or maybe a focus group. We did not want our friends at KY Stats to feel left out. So we put their names on here, inviting you to participate in this activity if you want to, but don't feel like it is a requirement since you are ad hoc members of this team. But I'm going to be quiet for a minute and give you all a minute to think. And if you feel so compelled, put in the stakeholder type. And also if there's an issue with you, the way your name was spelled, where you work or your role, feel free to fix that as well, because I think some of that information is going to be posted publicly, right, Robin?
It is. We wanted to give you the opportunity to edit anything about how your name is presented. I know you had said, let's see here. I believe it was Julie had said something about the parent camp, and so you might want to include that in your title as well. So we'll post a list of work group members for early post-secondary opportunities. So just make sure that what you want to have included about your own name and role is correct.
So if you saw on the screen, I just got going in my part, but I got there by clicking the link Robin shared. Then people can see on the screen, but I am going to let you all think and put something in there. Understand that you have the chance to go in and change this mind, or if you really don't feel like you can come up with something. But the idea is we kind of want to see if somebody's missing and if there's another group that staff may need to reach out to, or that somebody else needs to take on.
Yeah, Harmony, I was just thinking about the middle school teachers that were mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation. So if anybody has, we didn't specifically call that one out. So if anyone has access to middle school teachers, that would be a good group to include.
Mm-hmm. So eventually what we want on this form is who you're committing to interviewing, whether it's one person or, because some of you are writing a lot, which is appreciative, but that's a lot of 30-minute stakeholder interviews to do.
Harmony, just a quick question. What is it that we are interviewing them for? What are we trying to get out of this?
So that will, I have not seen the interview questions myself, but I have been assured that they will be compiled and you will have a form that is very easy for you to just provide the answers. And after you've done the interview prior to June 30th or by June 30th, we will tell you, here's where you need to email them back to. And somebody will do the magic and compile that information for us. Julie,
So-
yeah.
This planning document, though, is this just us listing everyone we have access to?
I mean, ultimately, we want you to commit to who you will be interviewing. So if we requested one, and I think it's amazing that people wrote more, but maybe as you see in the document, like, oh, 7 people wrote high school teachers, I can take that off and I'll focus on somebody else.
That's kind of why I asked the first question to figure out who'd be the best person to interview if you have multiple options.
Mm-hmm.
And clarifying question to Robin and Harmony, do we want the folks in the group that we choose to kind of wear the same hat or have same roles and responsibilities? Or is it okay for it to be a diverse group, like a CTE State Advisory Committee?
So it's okay to be a diverse group. We're not going to ask you to give us names, but we are going to ask for some identifying information so we can assure that a diversity that you're talking about, right? So we'd like to know, male, female. We'd like to maybe know urban, rural. I think there's a couple of other identifiers, Robin. I can't remember from our initial conversation. And for some reason, those notes are not, probably because I'm in the screen, available to me, right? But I know we're not going to do names, but we're asking for some information so we can ensure that we have taken, that we either are mindful of the fact that somebody's left out and somebody needs to do more work to capture an audience that we haven't captured, or, be able to say, oh, we interviewed 8 high school teachers, but 5 were rural and 2 were urban and 4 were male and 4 were female, or wherever we land.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and Leslie, you probably would have access to certain people who are in roles that are similar to yours, or we wanted this to be easy for you to get access to folks, but some of you may have have like relatives who have kids who are taking dual credit courses that you could ask. And I feel like that when you think back to those questions that were on the screen, the interview questions are really about how do we get information from people who are really having these experiences about what are their barriers, what would make this easier, what would make this better, to just get really practical information about how those things are going. And then let's see, there was one other question that I wanted to say. Oh, we want to make sure that anytime students are interviewed, we really don't want to know their names. So for any of you who are thinking that you would have access to students, we don't want to know that. We'll just kind of their demographic information, as Harmony mentioned. And Lauren, I don't know if you want to come off mute and say anything at all about the interview questions, but I would welcome that if you want to.
Sure, I can layer on a couple different things based on the questions that folks have asked. So one way that we approached these interviews last year, so essentially we did these interviews behind the scenes, working with the regional co-ops last year, now leveraging your all's relationships as work group members across the state to be able to conduct these interviews just as a kind of more sustainable structure for the CEC for their work moving forward. When we are thinking about who to be able to engage in these opportunities, I think diversity is really important. I think if we go back to our conversation we had as a group earlier today, when we were talking about equitable access being kind of a key pillar of what this work group wants to focus on, I think the extent to which you could think about, are there either individuals who represent some of those traditionally underrepresented groups? So whether that's in terms of racial diversity, income diversity, geographic diversity, first generation students, families, teachers of those first generation students or families. I think that's one thing to be able to consider if you're maybe grappling between a couple different folks you might engage. We also recognize like the people themselves that you might be interviewing may not fit that kind of diversity criteria, but you can also think about like who's just serving those students in that role. as another way just to make sure that we're really understanding like a diversity of perspectives and lived experiences through the conversations that you guys are having collectively as a group. So I think that would be one. As far as the interview questions, I mean, happy we could even share as a follow-up, but we essentially have a kind of master doc of potential interview questions targeted to each of these different core stakeholder groups. So like we have, here are 5 questions you might ask a student versus here are 5 questions you might ask a parent or a counselor, just to get you guys started. So you are not wedded. We'll send you those just in case you're like, you know what, I would rather just go into this interview and say, these are the 5 questions I need to ask. I'm fully set. But if there are other questions that you have that you think are really important to bring back to this group, you guys have the flexibility to be able to make updates to that list that we send you to. But I think what the CPE team is trying to do is just make this as easy as possible and make it as light of a lift. So I think they're going to be sending you a lot of different kind of tools and resources just so that it's pretty plug and play once you identify who you need to be able to talk to. But you guys really have a lot of autonomy in this process in terms of what that interview actually looks like.
There's a group that I want to know that I've not missed that somebody hasn't talked about. And that is, so just like UK, we have some faculty who like supervise, we have a full-time English faculty member who supervises all of our English dual credit. So I'm not really seeing the university faculty anywhere that somebody has agreed to interview that group.
I think you're right. And I think it'd be great if you could go for it.
Okay. I just didn't want to do double work, but somebody already had grabbed that group. But if other institutions that are on this call, or Harmony, maybe I don't know if there's, I mean, I would be more than happy to put together some type of Zoom focus group with that group, but I only know like our 4 or 5, right?
Yeah, so you might want to coordinate with I think there are 2 other folks from 4-year institutions on here, you know, and maybe when you are ready to have that focus group, say, feel free to share this link with your faculty who fit this group so they can be part of this conversation.
Okay.
Right. And Jenny, you might even consider collaborating with some of the folks who are on the other 2 work groups who are also meeting, because you all might be able to share questions, you know, across the aisle and get some feedback that way.
And what are those other 2 work groups?
Well, there's a work group on 9th grade on track. And then there's also a work group on first-year success. They're looking
the first-year success. Okay.
Success. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We can get those names to you.
I am so excited to see these boxes filling up. Thank you, everybody. Rest assured, you will get the questions and you'll get reminders. And then if you'll just remember that if for some reason there's one of these groups that you end up, groups or individuals that you end up not talking to, then just go in and update this document. But when we send out the questionnaire, we'll do the link to this as well, but it lives on the CAC Continuum, our folder, our subs folder for the EPSO, EPSO. Haven't figured out how to say that yet, work group. So, you know, great that you thought of so many, but if you then lead here and go like, well, I really said a lot and it looks like some others are doing this, go in and edit. But the more we can hear from, I think the more comprehensive information we will have. I remember Amanda Ellis sharing with a group of people that she, you know, they learned so much by doing these stakeholder conversations in the fall. You know, for example, there was a student who had an IOP who basically said, you know, nobody thought that I was dual credit material, but now he's a student at center and doing great, right? But so getting those different perspectives and understandings from students and their experience and other stakeholders is just really valuable. So thank you. Robin, I think we're ready to go back, or do you want to? I think those who are here have filled in. I think the missing slots are people who are not in today's meeting. So we were not sure if we needed the full 2 hours, but wanted to, fill them, or not fill them, but wanted to schedule them in case we did need. We've had some really great, robust discussion. Appreciate everybody's willingness to serve on the Commonwealth as a member of this work group, the Commonwealth Education Continuum. We will be uploading information about this group's activities, including your names and affiliations. So thank you. I saw some of you edit in that document. Appreciate you making sure we get it right on the CEC webpage. So the public facing, that's the public facing webpage that's available. And you can find it on CPE's website under the Our Work tab, and also then the Commonwealth Education Continuum. Also, if you have not noticed, there is a Google Drive accessible to workgroup members. So that's where all of the information is going to be housed to keep us on track. So notes from today will be uploaded there. Any other important and relevant documents will be updated there. And then, of course, you'll receive a follow-up emails with all of the details that we promised you, as well as links. But please double check that you have the next meeting dates on our calendar. I know this slide doesn't have the times, but I think the times for all of them were consistent. It was this 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time zone period, but that's not on the slide. But double check that you have them. And if you do not, we will get that out to you. Let either myself or Robin know, and we'll fix it. We might have to update the meeting link, but we have plenty of time to do that now that we know that 3 work groups cannot use the same Zoom meeting to get in case you wondered why you were bombarded with some messages prior to this meeting about where to log in. So before we let you go, we have one final question. Yes, and there, thank you, Robin. There is how you get in touch with me and Robin, in case you did not know how to do that. But to close out today's meeting, we would like to hear one final word from each of you. And that is the one word that best represents your thinking or feeling about our work together at the moment. And so I would invite you. Okay, Jennifer, thank you for making that note. We'll make sure to get in there to get it out to you. So if you would please indulge us in the chat and list your one word. Thank you for getting us going there, Stephanie. She feels encouraged. If you can close us out with that word, and then maybe we can see. It'd be beautiful if we had taken the time to do this in a Wordle and we can see it all come out, but maybe we can populate that later. But there's some great words coming out of here: encouraged, empowered, excited, grateful. Love the people who don't follow directions and felt they wanted to do 2 words: inspired and connected. Yes, and I'm glad that you feel free enough in this group to do that as well. Motivated, excited, curious, productive, supported. So keep it coming if you have not do that. But otherwise, I want to say thank you again for a wonderful meeting. You make my job as a co-chair really, really easy. I think Robin and I were not quite sure what to expect. I had not been part of this party prior to this, but this has been delightful. And I look forward to connecting with you all in future meetings.
Good to see everybody.
I'm going to put that contact information back up on the screen just in case any of you want to grab a picture of it. But I think you probably have gotten emails from both Harmony and me already, but I will put that up there just in case. Thank you all so much.
Go enjoy that spring.
Bye, Regina. Great to see you again.
I like the enthusiastic in all caps.
Yeah. Scott, I'm glad you were able to get into the chat at least a little bit. Safe driving. Safe travels.
Thanks. Just about home.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. All right. Y'all have a good one.
Okay, you too.
You too.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.